For hundreds of thousands of years, humans thrived as nomadic egalitarian hunter-gatherers. It was only around 10,000 years ago that a few societies around the world began to experiment with sedentism, agriculture, and hoarding of resources. These societies spurred feedback loops of growth, inequality, and environmental devastation, conquering and colonizing and domesticating everyone and everything in their path, causing the sixth largest mass extinction in the history of life on Earth. Today, we live in a world that is a mismatch of our evolution in more ways than one. We feel disconnected, isolated, and powerless. Can we find our way back to a life that better matches how humans ought to live? What can we learn about how to live well from other cultures who figured it out? Is there time to reverse our self-destructive trajectory? How can we reclaim our wildness? These are the themes of the Rewilding Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Michael Bauer. This podcast is produced and made possible from supporters on Patreon. Thank you. If the Rewilding Podcast inspires you, gives you hope, or makes you think, please subscribe, share it on social media, and become a patron at patreon.com/Peter Michael Bauer. If you're new to rewilding or want to expand your perception of it, I recommend attending one of my Rewilding 101 workshops, which I offer both in person in Portland, Oregon, and online for those who live around the world via Zoom. You can check upcoming dates and register at rewildportland.com. Every once in a while, I'm happy and stunned to find an educational organization that makes me feel envious at the clear impact that they're making on kids' lives and the fun they're having along the way. For me, finding inspiration in other organizations that are keeping ancestral skills alive is an important part of running my own organization, particularly those that serve the next generation. In this episode, I chat with Neal Ritter, a co-founder of the Laughing Coyote Project, a nonprofit teaching earth skills in Colorado since 2007. Neal is happily a generalist, aiming to be above average in as many skills as possible. He is known for playing capture the flag with exuberance and laughing loudly. Most importantly, he lives with his wife and two kids who homeschool on a 20-acre homestead they have the privilege of caretaking. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Neal.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we've kind of followed each other over the years. Well, I didn't realize that you had followed me. I'd been following Laughing Coyote for a while, and then
Yeah.
we met this summer at Boulder Outdoor Survival School, which was great.
hmm
And it was really awesome to be able to chat with you along the trail and learn more about what you've been up to and all that. And so that's what inspired this podcast conversation. I'll just start out for our listeners, if you could do kind of an introduction of what is the Laughing Coyote Project and how did it come about?
Yeah. I mean, just to be upfront here, I answer questions with long stories. That's kind of
Yeah,
my
yeah, no,
style.
this is
And,
all
uh,
about
and
storytelling.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's kind of, Laughing Coyote is sort of a storytelling vehicle in a sense. I mean, it was
Mhm.
we wanted to work with kids. And so I didn't know terms like primitive skills, earth skills, all this stuff. My wife, Chelsea, and I, we wanted to start a school. Um, but the idea of actually starting a school was really overwhelming. We're like, oh
Mhm.
gosh, we don't know, like legally that sounds complicated.
Mhm.
Um, because we had this idea of like, how do we have a school, but it like doesn't really have classrooms or like experiential learning, all this stuff that
Mhm.
um, many of us think would be a great way to learn. So we decided we're just going to get some kids, some homeschool kids, because they would have a full day available and we'll have them show up and we'll do stuff outside. And this was, goodness, 18 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
wow.
we started with 5 kids. We had, because parents would ask us like, "What are you going to be doing?" We're like, I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
have no idea." But we had all sorts of big ideas. Of oh, we're gonna teach them about plants and animals and tracking, and um, we had 3 kids sign up, and then at 10 p.m. the night before our first day, 2 more kids signed
Nice.
up.
Yeah.
And so that first day, I still remember it. I mean, we had like we were just running around and like looking at tree bark and we'd say things like, "Oh gosh, someone's coming," and we all jump in the bushes and no one would show up, but we just kind of like that kind of edge of like
hmm
awareness,
hmm
paranoia, and paying
hmm
attention. And um And it started building. We had other parents start coming to us and be like, "Hey, would you do an after school program?
Mm.
Would you do a weekend program?" Um, and it just kept growing and growing. And in the beginning, it was like, "Oh, we'll do this for a couple of years and then find a real job or whatever." And then it just kept going, and we had more and more kids, and we started running summer camps, and um, we didn't know that we also had to run a business. It was like, "Oh, we're just gonna teach
Yeah.
kids," and then like 3 years in, someone was like, "Oh, who do you use for insurance?" And I'm like, "Should we have insurance?"
Oh man.
You know? And so it's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I guess we'll find
Uh,
insurance." So we figured that piece out, and it was like, "Oh, I guess we should probably file taxes." Like we just didn't know. Like we were young,
totally.
didn't really
Yeah.
know like the reality. It took us a couple of years to come up with a website and
Mhm.
um, all those pieces, and then we had a few different groups going. We had an after school program, a few homeschool groups, really successful summer camps. And then we thought, we should go learn something. At this point, I had done like a week-long survival course, and I'd also done the art of mentoring at
Mm,
Wilderness Awareness
mhm,
School. But that was it. That was like all we knew.
mhm,
And so we told everyone we're going to take like a 3 or 4 month sabbatical and go and try to take some classes and figure out more things to teach. And the first thing we did is we went to the Slick Rock Gathering at Boss, Boulder
mm,
Outdoor
mhm.
Survival School. Um, and suddenly it blew our mind. We're like, oh, this is what we want. We met people who were wearing buckskin. We'd never seen that before, and like homemade sandals and eating with spoons that they had carved. And it was like the door blew open. And
Mm,
we're like,
mhm.
what is this? Chelsea wanted to learn basketry. So she showed up for a willow basketry class. And I wanted to do flint knapping. And it was the one year they didn't offer flint knapping.
Oh.
Maybe I'll do hide tanning because I was like, maybe someday I would like to hunt and I'd like to know how to tan a hide. And that also was like one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Mm, mhm.
The guy teaching the class Digger became a close friend and inspired me so much and then opened the doors to other connections with other people. So we came back and we're like, we are a primitive skills school. And we
Nice.
suddenly had this
Yeah.
language
Mhm,
and so then very shortly after that we went to winter camp for the first time
mm,
and we began to meet other instructors and we'd invite them out for
mm,
guest
mhm,
workshops. Um, and so we just started learning and learning and learning and going and here we are 18 years later. And so what is Laughing Coyote? I mean, yeah, legally we're a nonprofit. We teach primitive skills to youth and adults. But, it's kind of with so many of us in this field, in this work, it's more of like a lifestyle or,
mhm,
we're trying to create a culture or movement or community. I mean, we have
mhm,
these skill shares once a month. Folks come out and it's like a place where we can just settle into connection, whether it's just the connecting to other people and the land. I mean, that's in a nutshell what it's all about.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, it was really special to spend the week with you and your students who'd been in your programs for a really long time because you can just see like the effect of growing up with the skills around them. I mean, they were all like super competent at, whatever, 16, and that was the age I was when I started getting into skills, although I'd done scouts and stuff like that. But I think their level of fluency or proficiency and competency and just being comfortable outdoors was like, they did better than adults that
Yeah,
I took
right.
out. They
Yeah.
were doing better than the adults, and um, so that was really special. But I think, for the other side of it is you're saying, we just started teaching. Like, no, like there's a couple of thoughts I have. One is like the classic sort of like fake it till you make it. Like
Hmm.
I feel like you've successfully done that.
Yeah, for sure.
From your description, it
Yeah.
sounds like
Yeah.
and there are definitely people who do not do that successfully. But and it just makes me yeah, appreciate the origin even more because I'm in a similar way where we just kind of started doing stuff here in Portland, and have experienced similar challenges over the years and things. One of the things I wanted to ask you is where were you doing stuff initially, and how did you like location wise? How did you end up, where you are now?
Yeah. So Yeah, there's going to be no simple answers. I moved a lot as a kid, and I moved to this area of Colorado when I was 12 or 13 years old. And my mom is really good at networking, and she found this little summer camp at a farm close to our house, and I went as a CIT, a counselor in training,
Hmm.
and my two younger siblings went as campers. It was run by this incredible woman named Claudia, who's kind of peripherally involved in the Waldorf community in our area. And it was a blast and I had a lot of fun. And so I then worked for her every summer. You know, I was a CIT for a couple of years and then I became an instructor and eventually became like her head camp counselor by the time I was like 18.
Hmm.
And she became a mentor to me. And um, and so yeah, that was like my summer gig, among other things, but I would do that every year. And then there's a certain point when Chelsea, my wife and I, we weren't married at the time, but we traveled through Central and South America for 4 months. And this is where we had this idea to start a school. And we got back, and Claudia called me up and was like, "Hey, I'm doing camp. Do you want to help out?" And I was broke and was like, "Absolutely." So I showed up, and there's this wild moment. I knew that she was essentially planning to be done with running her camps. She was at a point where she wanted to transition to other things and had been looking for someone to take over for her.
Mm, mm,
She didn't do primitive skills. She didn't do it was different, but it was sort of this very magical experience for kids to just be outside with her
totally.
style was with very little structure, lots of
Hmm.
storytelling, um, various crafts. And she looked over at me and almost without saying, like with no context, she's like, "Oh, it's you." Meaning like, "You're the
Yeah,
one who's taking this over."
right.
And I looked at
Yeah.
her and I've been at this moment like, I need a job. And instead of
Mhm.
waiting for 10 years, I'm going to just do what I want to do now.
Mhm.
And I looked back at her, I was like, "Yeah, it's me."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then we began a series of conversations. I had to meet her husband, who I hadn't met before, who also became an incredible mentor to me, taught me how to do construction, and we played guitar and all sorts of things. And crazy aspect of this story is that she was also my wife's preschool teacher
Mm.
at like a little illegal in the basement of somebody's house preschool. So they said, "Why don't you use our farm for this school
Mm.
program that you want to start?" And she was actually the one who came up with she wanted us to say project on. So Chelsea came up with the idea of Laughing Coyote, and she's like, "We'll call it a project because you don't know where you're going yet." And
Mm.
I still love that idea because it's like we just it's like evolution keeps
Hmm.
happening. There's
Yeah.
no place we've ever settled, you know?
Yeah.
So we decided we would lease their 5 acre farm to run our programs. We were about to get started, and John, her husband, sat me down. He's like, "You guys have 5 students. You have no money." I'm like, "You're right." And so he's like, "Let's wait on rent until you can afford to pay rent." So we didn't pay rent for like a year and a half or something, maybe two
Amazing.
years. And then when we started paying rent, it was like $250 a month.
Hmm.
And then we were like 6 months in, and there was another piece of this where it was like we wanted to do something with farming. And so we started a garden. They had some chickens. We wanted to take care of the chickens. And we said, "Look, we can't do this properly if we don't live here.
Mm.
So I think we're going to fundraise and buy a yurt and put it on your farm and live here. Is that okay?" And John was like, "A yurt, what's that?" And I described it. He's like, "That sounds kind of silly." And so he grabbed a tape measure and he went into their old barn and he measured a corner. He's like, "Let's build a house here." And
Amazing.
so
Yeah.
Jelsey's dad, who's an old Italian guy from Italy, he designed it. And then the four of us, her dad, Raffaele, and John, and Jelsey and I met every Friday for like the next 4 months and built a little house.
Amazing.
And so then we moved out there, and then we lived there for 8 years. Um, and our son was born there, and over time, you know, the farming grew, but the farming was kind of separate from the programs. Um, and you know, as we had more students, we started paying more in rent to give back to John and Claudia. But yeah, that's how it all started.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that I mean, it's really cool to hear the lineage aspect of before you decided to start the school because I feel like there's some things that get left out.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, specifically, my question was going to be, do you have a history or a background in education? And,
Hmm, hmm.
you know, hearing you say you were like this counselor in training and that you did this every
Yeah.
summer, there's this compounding effect, I think, of doing that in your youth that like propels you to be really good at it as an adult,
Hmm,
if that
hmm,
makes
hmm.
sense.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
and so in a sense, I was joking earlier about you faking it to make it, but like you already had some elements, right? And of
Yeah.
course, maybe you didn't know the primitive skills side of things or whatever. But having the component to be a teacher and a learner is, in my opinion, more important than, some of than somebody who's really skilled who just doesn't know how to teach a thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, when I noticed how you were with your students, and I was really impressed by their skill level and just how calm and chilled they were, and like the flow of everything that you had set up. I think like the pinnacle of it was when we were at that cave. We stayed in a special cave in a
Hmm.
canyon in
Yeah.
Utah that is gorgeous, and it has this deep echo. And I like walked up or something, and your students were all singing, and it was just the most like beautiful song, and the way it was like the sound was traveling, and they were all just like singing, and they were singing in different tones, like they weren't all singing the same, and it was just like
Hmm.
this amazing, sound, but also like it wasn't just the sound, it was like their collaboration and their
Hmm.
like unity or whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I just started crying. I don't know if you realize if I told you that or if you
yeah.
realize that, but I just like sat down and I just was like listening and just like had tears coming down on my face. And I was
Hmm.
just like, this is such a beautiful moment
Hmm.
to be experiencing with you guys out here. And it was just like, yeah, I think it's a culmination of a lot of things to see, well, everything in a sense of it is a culmination, but
Hmm. Yeah.
to kind of see this coalescence of your students and of you as a teacher. Um, I had a point I was going to make aside from just complimenting you. Um, oh, right, yeah, yeah, okay, I got it. So after that, or maybe it was before that, but we were talking, and I had already noticed like what I considered like a super skilled on your part for working with students, and I was just kind of like, how does so much singing happening? Like, how do I try to replicate this? Like, what do you have, And then you told me that you had grown up at going to Waldorf, and I was just like, okay, right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
okay, right now everything makes sense now. Like,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and
right.
obviously there's challenges, and I have critiques about Waldorf schools, and I'm sure you do, and we've talked some
Hmm.
about that. But like, still, there's this thing I think that I definitely notice about myself and that I see in other people where if they grow up with a particular skill as an adult, it can seem effortless to
Yeah.
them. And my girlfriend has this where, she for a living makes tiny things with her hands for movie sets. And like every time I've talked to her about it, she's like, "Oh, I don't know, like I went to school for ceramics." And I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, but what was
Yeah,
it growing
yeah,
up like? And she's like, oh, well, my mom worked at the summer camp every summer, and I went to the summer
yeah,
camp, and
right, right,
it was like
right, right.
it was a craft
Yeah,
summer camp. And so
yeah,
every year from the time I was like 6 or whatever, I'm a little
yeah,
older. And then she was like, and by the time I was a teenager, I was actually working there in the
yeah,
ceramics and
yeah,
teaching other children pottery and blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, okay. There's
yeah,
this kind of like fluency that gets built
yeah,
that I mean, I'm sure I could develop some of these skills as an adult, but I
yeah.
think it's a lot harder, right?
Absolutely,
And so
absolutely.
I feel like these youth education programs, and one of the things I see with yours is that it's just done so well. And I not only is it like you are a great teacher and you have and your excitement for education like goes into your students, but
Hmm.
also just seeing these students that had come up through your program that were just like already essentially super competent, and like I can't
Hmm.
even imagine what they're going to be like in like 5 years or
Yeah,
10
right,
years.
right, right,
You know
right.
what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's just really, really cool. So
yeah.
thank you for inspiring me and sharing these stories on social
Hmm.
media, because that's how I really started following you, was through
Yeah, yeah,
the Laughing Coyote Instagram, which
yeah.
I get total FOMO over. I'm like, wow, I wish Rewild Portland's not like that. We don't have access to land. Well, maybe we could. I mean, part of it is
Yeah.
imagination too. Like just seeing what you've accomplished and built is
Hmm.
really deeply inspiring.
Yeah.
And so kind of to transition to that and ask my next question is, you guys do a lot of stuff there. Like you're not just doing survival skills or bushcraft or like foraging. Like you're full on gardening and farming
Yeah.
and bushcraft and like animal husbandry and like all these
Mhm.
different skills. And it just seems like so much, which, for me, I get overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, I just gotta focus on like survival skills or something. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
tracking, like there's so many things you can learn from all of that. How do you teach it and structure your programs where all of these different skills kind of coalesce together in like a holistic way that
Mhm.
feels um like connected, I guess is what I'm trying to
Mhm.
say. Because I feel like
Yeah.
I look at the images and stuff, and I'm like, wow, they're doing all these things, and it feels sort of like natural and together. But like when I'm doing stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm teaching tracking, and then that's tracking, and I don't really know how to exactly relate it to like friction fire or
Yeah,
something. You know what
right,
I mean?
right,
Like
right.
these.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's this way that you can do it, and it seems
Mhm.
like you do. And I'm just curious if you have any thoughts around how you guys do that, or
Yeah,
tips for anybody who might be listening.
right. Well, I think, a lot of credit for a lot of this also has to go to my wife, Chelsea, because, when you were talking about growing up with things, like she grew up in a community that had a garden, so like she's been garden, she doesn't remember not gardening,
Yeah.
and, I learned how to kill chickens with her family.
Mm.
And so like for her, like growing up, killing chickens, extracting honey from their beehives, like she grew up on this sort of like retired hippie commune. Like it was a hippie commune and then everybody like matured.
Yeah.
But a lot of that communal living was still there and it was a value that her parents had. So and also just quick tangent on the musical note, like we both grew up in musical families.
Mm.
So like on road trips, and my father's a musician by education, but never did it as a career. But on road trips, we would sing in like four-part harmony like from when I was like 10 years old.
Amazing.
That was just like normal, right? And her
Yeah.
family is similar in the musical department. Um, so I would say that we we're both like really fairly intense high energy people. And and we happen to have a partnership that's very compatible where we just like love working and we
Mhm.
love working together. And so I mean, it's a funny thing. Like when I was growing up, the word chores was like a bad word. Like, oh, it's Saturday, we all have to do chores, and like nobody wanted to do chores. The parents don't want to do chores. The kids don't want to do chores. We're all like, we have to do this terrible thing, and we wake up and it's like, who gets to do chores this morning?
Mm.
Like, who's gonna get out
Yeah.
there first and like milk the cow and move the chicken coop and all these things. And so there's that piece where it's like we're willing to put in 14-hour days. Like that's just part of life. And like homeschooling our kids and like cooking 3 meals a day and like sitting down as a family 3 times a day for home cooked meals, like from food we produce. It's like it's what we do.
Hmm.
So it's like there's just not there's a few other things we do off the farm now as the kids are getting older, but in essence, it's like this is our life. And so that connection piece, you're like, how do things connect? It's like it's everything. And in fact, today, so for example, we woke up early and it's getting dark now, so running our programs is physically demanding. So we spent like 45 minutes doing like mobility in the dark before we start our day because like at this point we have to. And then like we go outside and we're like Chelsea milked the cow. I feed the cows. Isaac, who lives at our place too and is one of our instructors, but he's also incorporated in this whole thing. Like he was doing chicken chores. My son Lutrea was out doing his chicken chores. Fiona was out helping. She's learning how to milk the cow. She's 9 years old. And then we taught students all day. Um, and then right before we started talking, I was outside to talk with my kids. Fiona, my daughter, is in a cattail shelter, like hanging out, working on stuff. Lutreo is making wooden swords that he sells at craft fairs. And Isaac was just hanging out under a tree working on bow drill because he had a question of like he wanted to experiment with.
Hmm.
And so this is the thing. There's like no separation. Like I have 2 hides I need to smoke. So like when we're done here, we'll probably put on an audiobook with the kids and I'll just like be sewing hides. So it's like it's so integrated into life. Now, the what's interesting is that when we started running the programs, when we latched onto this idea of being a primitive skills program, we kind of wanted to separate from everything that didn't feel like primitive skills. And so we're known for also playing a lot of really high energy games. We make up games, we steal games from people, we modify games. We have a list of like well over 100 games, and like 20 of them are variations on capture the flag. So we're just like out running all the time. But when we started doing primitive skills, I'm like, we should probably stop playing so many games. Like, that's not really a primitive skill, playing games. And like people are always like, you guys are musical. We hear you singing. Like, why don't you do music? We're like, I don't know. That's not really a primitive skill. And
Mm,
we kind of separated, like, we were still farming because like we needed to eat, and we were also like we just didn't make a lot of money. So it was like we needed the garden.
mhm,
Like it was subsistence from the beginning.
mhm,
And then over time we realized, hang on a second, like humans play. Like
mhm,
that is how we connect and build relationships. And when I started learning about sort of the whole natural movement sort of movement, you could say, I was like, oh, when we're running and jumping and crawling and throwing and chasing and tagging, like that's like natural human movement.
mhm,
And the first time we just randomly taught a song to some kids, we're like, oh, they're gonna be all embarrassed, nobody's gonna want to sing. And they're like, can we do another one?
mhm,
And suddenly we're like, holy smokes, we have a repertoire again of like hundreds of songs that
mhm,
both of us just grew up singing.
mhm,
And we're like, wow, we can just teach a song every day. And it's like one of everyone, it's like their favorite part of the day is to like
mm,
learn a song and like hear their voices mixing
mm,
together in different
mhm,
parts. And so the funny thing is now recently we're only now reintegrating the homesteading piece.
mm,
When we run our gathering in the summer, we quickly realized we wanted to produce as much of the food as possible from the farm
mm,
because
mhm,
it felt weird to be like, oh, let's all connect to nature and then buy a bunch of packaging.
mhm.
Which is also like there's also realities to this
Sure.
thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah, of
it's not
course.
like not necessarily a model everyone can do, but like
Right.
we have a milk cow. So like for breakfast, like there's milk, there's yogurt, there's butter. Like if we're doing oatmeal or something, like there's butter from our cow on the table. And the meat was either all sourced from the farm or neighbors or roadkill. Which everyone was, they were like, are you joking? I'm like, no, I've been saving these deer legs for you all year. Um, and then all the vegetables were from the garden. We plant the garden for the gathering, and at that moment we realized, and like we use composting toilets with our students, and we're composting it, and then it goes on the fields, and at the gathering I taught a little class on composting toilet that I thought was going to be like a 40-minute lecture, and it turned into like a 4-hour
Mm,
hands-on. People are like, can I empty the buckets and clean the buckets, and then how do you put it in the garden and all this stuff. And so, yeah, kind of the next question is how do we begin to incorporate all this living with the land? Because I think you and I both have such an affinity for like hunter-gatherer traditions,
mhm,
um, which is one of the reasons I was unsure about integrating the farm into what we were doing. And yet, like living with the land in the modern world, it really makes sense. And it's
mhm,
probably one of the more long-term impactful things we can offer. Um, And so even just like a couple weeks ago, we had students and we made ash cakes on the fire, but then we handed around jars of cream and they were like shaking cream and make butter. And we'd gone to a neighbor's and harvested a bunch of apples and made apple butter. So it was like ash cakes
mm,
with fresh butter
mm.
and apple butter. And
Oh man.
and so they're just like suddenly like tied into the landscape.
Mhm,
And they're looking at the grass and like, wow, this is eaten by the cow, which is milked, which is
mhm,
skimmed, which we should. And now we're like, and so all these interconnected pieces fit together. And again, back to the question of like, how do we do that? I don't really know how not to do that.
yeah.
It's just, you know, we cut a tree down and we're like, okay, what can we make out of it?
Mhm,
Let's make spoons, let's make bow drill
mhm,
kits, let's, whatever it is, what the resources that are around, it all just has to. it all fits together.
It reminds me of like um one of the things I'm thinking about is how it's possible for you to do this because, and this leads into our next kind of topic too, but it's possible for you as a family to live this particular lifestyle so heavily because it's a school that's
Mhm.
teaching these particular things, right? And if somebody had like a day job somewhere else, or if they were just doing like milk production for their
Mhm.
job or
Mhm.
something like that, it may not have the same type of potential. And that's essentially why I started Rewild Portland, because I was like, how do I create an environment that is economically viable to keep these skills alive? And it reminds me of I don't know if this is a great analogy, but in China they outlawed kung fu for a time or whatever, and they kept it alive secretly at the opera, which is
Uh,
where like Jackie Chan was trained,
right,
it was
right.
the
Yeah,
opera.
yeah.
And it just makes me think about like the little economic, the hidden little bubbles of things that keep particular ways of living alive. And I think
Mhm.
about um, these types of nonprofit schools and stuff and youth programs as essentially kind of like the Chinese theater or whatever, the
Mhm.
ballet, where um, it essentially is a youth program that keeps people alive, or that keeps these skills alive by educating kids
Yeah,
for a time when it is maybe more prevalent again in the
yeah,
future.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've thought about with our lifestyle is there's certain practices that, we all think are good for you or healthy, like, oh, let's go outside every day. You'd be like, well, of course. It's important to be outside every day. Or now, one of the things is like, oh, we're realizing how important sunlight is and for your circadian rhythm,
Yeah.
like get outside
Yeah.
first thing in the morning for
Yeah.
5 to 10 minutes of sunlight, all this stuff. And yet, knowing something is good for you, it's still hard to like be consistent.
Totally. Yeah.
So one of the things we did is we made a lifestyle where we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
You make it a hard decision where it's like, I can't decide whether or not to go out and let the chickens out in the morning because if I don't, they die.
Right.
Like, it's a very simple binary equation. And so it's like when it is -10 degrees and windy and nobody wants to go outside, we still go outside
Yeah.
every day. We only heat our house with firewood that we put up ourselves because then I have to like go find, we get it. We don't like cut down trees per se, but there's so much fire mitigation in our area that we get logs that are cut for fire mitigation and then we buck them with a chainsaw and then we have splitting axes and then we hang out on the weekends and we split wood together and we talk and we connect and people are like, oh, rent a splitter. I'm like, yeah, but then when would we talk to each other?
Hmm.
You know? Um, and so there's that piece of, I think I'm very blessed. Well, and there's like a luck. I think of luck a lot as like hard work plus opportunity. Like I'm so lucky. The fact that I own this land is like mind blowing to me. And I work my tail off every day for good luck. Like
Sure.
14-hour days, like I said, like that's just normal life to earn all that luck. So I think that yeah, if you had to leave your home, some of these subsistence practices are a lot more challenging for
Hmm.
sure. I think there's always small steps that folks could probably take.
Hmm.
It's you grow a little food in your backyard, you have a couple chickens, whatever it is. Um, but yeah, we are very lucky in that sense that our lifestyle, I essentially do every day what I'd want to be doing anyway.
Hmm. Yeah.
And like any job, there are days when I don't want to go to work.
Hmm.
Again, wind, negative temperatures, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
if everyone stayed home and we just like hung out by the wood stove, like that'd probably be really nice.
Yeah.
But it is. We've created a structure where we essentially have to do what we want to do.
Hmm.
And I mean, this in the primitive skills world, like nobody's actually making that much money. I mean, a couple people have figured it out, but
Totally.
those of us who are like
Yeah.
in the field teaching, like
Yeah.
we're not making much money. Um, but there's like a certain simplicity and minimalism that I think is a part of this work. And it's like for entertainment, like we go to a random ditch and cut sticks so we can weave baskets. You know, like
Yeah.
it's not like a high spendy kind of lifestyle for
Hmm.
fun either.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of like I'm trying to wrap my head around lately how to uh set people up in with material conditions to increase their probability of doing things. Like you were saying, there's hard work and opportunity. And I've been having this conversation a lot over this last year of like opportunity, or probability is another way that I kind of look at it. Like, um, I had this conversation at Boss with one of the instructors who's a poker player,
Hmm.
and he was talking about probabilities a lot in terms of like successfully winning a card game,
Hmm. Hmm.
and knowing based on the probabilities and the cards that are in play, like when to fold and when to,
Yeah.
um, and so I've been thinking about that a lot with life. There was that that book that came out in the early 2000s, The Secret. And there
Oh
was
yeah.
all this,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just like
Yeah.
the law of attraction or whatever, and
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't believe that personally, but I do believe uh in increasing probability. And then I think that what they are thinking of as a law of attraction is specifically you increase your odds if you're thinking about a thing regularly. If you're,
Mhm.
envisioning it, you're looking for those opportunities and then you see opportunities more.
Yeah.
And so I just think about like the holistic thing, like you were saying, you've made this something that you have to do. And I would counter that and say, like, you don't have to do that though.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like you're still
Absolutely.
choosing.
Yeah.
And that's one thing but at the same time, like you're setting yourself up to do the things, right? So
Hmm.
like it reminds me of like in my early 20s, late teens, I worked at a coffee shop and like I could have taken the bus there every day, but I rode my bike instead to get movement in,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I was like, if I ride my bike and I schedule everything correctly, then I get like a workout or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like
Totally.
integrated into my day.
Yeah.
And so I was setting it up that way, thinking about like I need to get movement every day. If I'm working down there, I'm going to do that. And I feel like what you've done is just that to like this extreme level.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in part, it's, like the 14-hour day thing. I definitely see you as a high energy person. I have not met your partner, so I don't know. But there's definitely people that have that just super high energy and super focus. And not everybody has that. But at the same time, the other thing that you have, that the two of you have built there is this community. You're talking about not just your children, but your students and like, your live-in students and the people who you were renting your land from initially
Mhm.
and all these
Yeah.
things, right? Like there's, and a collective
Yeah.
a collective value system to value these types of things, right? Whereas like, you know, um, for me, like at this moment, I'm living just with my partner in town. We don't have any other roommates.
Yeah.
Um, you know, she works 9 to 5, and I basically just do Rewild Portland stuff. And we have a community, but it's just not the same way where we're not living in proximity.
Yeah.
And I think that's like one of the huge components of that. And people are always talking about like wanting to live on land and stuff like that with people, which I think is a lot harder to do
Yeah.
in the city in
Yeah.
particular,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can't figure out specific ways of increasing the probability or increasing the likelihood that you'll do things. Like right now, um, I love stories. I love media. I've always loved television and movies ever since I was a child. I was
Yeah.
originally my whole thing was I was going to be a filmmaker. I was
Yeah.
going to go to USC before I read Daniel Quinn and Tom Brown and dropped out of high school because I thought civilization was going to collapse.
Yeah.
Before all that, I was really into storytelling and movies and things. So I like to watch movies and stuff like that. And um, one of the things I want to do is weave more and maximize that time. And
Hmm.
so I have like a whole setup where I can be weaving if I'm watching something in the evening,
Yeah.
because I also just kind of am brain dead in the
Yeah.
evening and have a hard time reading or
Hmm.
writing.
Yeah.
So, but weaving at this point is pretty easy. So like setting up the whole living room to kind of be like a little weaving corner, I can just sit
Yeah.
there. But even then, there's still like I still have to have some sort of discipline to sit in that chair as opposed to another one and
Yeah.
still have to like do the
Yeah.
thing. Whereas, if there were other people that lived in this house that were crafting as well, like I
Hmm.
would want to do more of that too. Like I'm a super social person.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if people in the living room were sitting around crafting, I'd probably go in there and start crafting with them.
yeah,
But if they're sitting around like watching TV, I'm just going to go in there and watch TV with them too,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so I feel like it's a it's an important like stud. You are an important study in like the setup of how to have this particular kind of life, you know.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
yeah, so I again I feel very inspired by and get FOMO. And also there's a little bit of sadness, you know. I feel like I've had this most of my life of just like when I meet people who are fluent in a particular thing, there's like a kind of sadness that I didn't
Yeah,
get that particular thing. But also there's like the grass is always greener, or like I don't
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
also like projecting things and I don't recognize my own gifts and things like that.
yeah, for sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Rewilding Podcast. I wanted to pause and make a request for your support. This podcast is made possible by donations on Patreon. With so much media filled with misinformation and outright lies these days, small independent outlets and people like mine are some of the only ones left striving for brave, truthful inquiry. I need your support to continue bringing you thoughtful, hopeful discourse on human resilience. Please become a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/Peter Michael Bauer. Thank you for keeping my project going. The world needs this. I think that the next sort of question around this stuff is this notion of like keeping these programs sustainable, you know. And we're kind of facing this with Rewild Portland right now because I'm in a place where I'm just so burned out on doing these programs and trying to expand in various ways that we've like, you know, we're calling it coppicing. We're using the
Yeah.
land tending metaphor for the organization. We've coppiced it, meaning we've cut back a lot of the programs that we do, including almost the majority of our youth programs and some of our community programs, just because we grew without, you know, a lot of tending that needed to happen, maybe slower.
Hmm.
And essentially what it felt like was sort of, you know, an old apple tree that's all overgrown and
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
the fruit is rotten now. Like it's all
yeah.
tangled. What the hell is going on? You've got to like just get in there and coppice the crap out of it or pollard it or whatever, you know, and prune it.
Mhm.
And so we've been doing that this last year, and I'm finally starting to sort of feel like a awakening again. But part of this process is a succession plan for me to leave the organization, or at least to step away from the role that I've put myself in. And I feel like this is similar but different in the setup that you have. But in my situation, you know, I thought that if I set up this organization, that I would end up learning a lot more by putting myself at the center of it. And what it ended up being was sitting behind a computer and doing a lot more
Yeah.
administration, which like I'm just not good at. And it just became more
Yeah.
and more and more of that.
Yeah.
You know, we had like essentially like five different types of businesses running simultaneously. You know, we
Mhm,
had a
mhm.
homeschool, a summer camp, uh, you know, echoes in time, like large events. We have like a greenhouse that we bought. We have, you know, adult programs. Like there's just like too much, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then all these free program community programs are running, and it's just like instead of being really good at a couple things or one thing, we're just like mediocre at a lot of stuff. And then
Mhm,
it just
mhm.
became so heavily challenging for me to really enjoy myself in the position that now we've coppiced things. We're building a succession plan. I'm developing programs that I'm more inspired to, so I can just return to being a teacher
Yeah,
and
yeah,
not have to do as much of this administration stuff because I just got completely bogged down by it.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, in terms of thinking about succession, like our organizations are similar, but also very different. And I know you have a similar thoughts in terms of like, how does this continue without us
Mhm.
necessarily being in charge, or like, what's the retirement plan,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, for something along those lines? Like, how does this feed into the future?
Mhm,
How can this continue to sustain the people coming up underneath you? Can it sustain
mhm.
those people? Like, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah. Well, I think, we stumbled into sort of a model that worked really well for us because similar to you, the administrative piece is not something that I would say for either of us is our strong suit. However, luckily, Chelsea is incredibly organized. Like
Mm.
she's just so gifted at like being methodical about, like communicating with people and tracking stuff. Um, And so while that's not a skill set either of us feel very comfortable in, we also we were so caught up in just teaching that we never got to the point where we could really work on the business, so to speak, and actually grow that much because it was sort of self-limiting. Um,
Mhm.
we always had a couple of assistants over the years, former students who would work with us for a year or two and then move on to other things, but it stayed really small scale. And I think, when you were describing having all these multiple facets to Rewild Portland, we really had homeschool programs and summer camps. And like that was it. And combined with like the willingness to live very modestly, like our entire organization right now has 4 employees, and we bring in like as an organization, our gross receipts are like half of the median income in our area for like a single household. And and we're living off of that. Multiple people are because we're all just willing to be so frugal. And that luck piece of we happen to acquire living situations where it's like our cost to live, like in terms of mortgage or rent, has always been very low. And that's just like a whole serendipitous thing that's a different story. Um, and so we were very comfortable for a long time, it being the two of us. And then Isaac came on board 7 or 8 years ago and essentially just wanted, like, this was his dream. He grew up 5 minutes down the road, found us, and we're like, well, you want to jump on board? And we didn't do it very elegantly. Like he kind of just slipped in um and started living with us after a year or two and really loved the homesteading piece and the teaching piece. And we're trying to figure out how do we incorporate him, how do we give him space to teach, to offer things. Um, I'm kind of a control freak, as is Chelsea. Like we have a really good dynamic, but like letting somebody else offer something is actually really challenging for us. It's been a long process to figure that out. Um, and then we've also been lucky in that there's some other organizations that we know of in the area where we know the founders, and we watch them get to old enough where they wanted to move beyond the organization, but hadn't thought about it until they were like 70. Um, and so we were pretty clear, like starting even 5 years ago, like we need to think about where this thing is going. I'm in my late 30s right now, and it was like I need to like I'm hoping to do this as long as I can. Like this is it for me. There's nothing else I can imagine doing other than like write books, which is essentially just the same thing, just not outside. It's just this. I'm
Sure.
gonna just
Yeah.
write books about the same stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it was very clear we needed to think about where we were going. So we thought about it. It was like, do we just do this until we can't, and then we just close the doors, and that was it. Um, and that seemed kind of sad. And so, um, what does the next step look like? We don't know, but we did realize we need to create space for some of our students as they graduate our youth programs. We need to provide opportunities for them. And so we haven't run summer camps consistently for like 5 years, and we're going to bring that back in to have a space for them to develop teaching skills. And whether that remains at Laughing Coyote or it gives them a skill they can bring into the wider world, it's a way in which there's a place for them to be here. We're also going to start having opportunities for these student graduates to work on the farm, which we've never had before as a paid gig. Because again, I think that living close to the land in that way is perhaps one of the most valuable skills we can offer
Hmm.
moving forward. And so the first thought was, okay, how do we create a place for our graduates so that it's not like you're 18, we love you. Thank you so much for being here. See you later. Now it's like, and not everyone's going to be able to stick around, but
Sure.
for those that
Yeah.
want to, or we have the space for, like, what's that next phase of learning that mix of living with the land through homesteading plus teaching? I think the hope and dream that we're just starting to talk about is, I think the only way that we can turn this really into that community movement where people can be with us long term is there has to be housing.
Mm-hmm.
And our where we live, the building regulations are really complicated. So what that means is we're going to have to fundraise and buy another property, um, hopefully adjacent to us or walkable. But we need to have a space where folks can live because again, the fact that we're able to be so frugal in our income is that it costs us very little to live, and so we get to do what we love. Um, but we don't have to stress about having multiple jobs and live in a house with seven roommates and whatever. Um, so I think that's the direction we're hoping to move in is um, there's going to have to be some level of growth, but to keep it trim, to keep it efficient, to keep it at the core, make sure we remain true to what this is about and that we want to be outside connecting with other people living with the land. And not get to the point where it's like, oh yeah, we're leasing like seven properties and we have 1,000
Yeah.
kids a year. And man, some people do
Yeah.
that. And I love that there are people who are willing to put in the time at their computer to organize all that so that all these kids get opportunity. Um,
Yep.
that's not going to be us. We're
Yeah.
going to remain this sort of like small laboratory where we're just always pushing the envelope, pushing evolution, experimenting with new ways to teach, new ways to connect, coming up with new games. And then hopefully there's some way, maybe it's through the writing of books, maybe it's some other way that we share that information with the wider world, but that whoever stays involved with us, it's like we're just going to be a small mom and pop shop. That's the
Yeah.
plan.
I mean, yeah, and I think that's really the actual the more sustainable way of doing things is staying small in that way. I mean, people think that to, make money, you have to scale up to a certain degree, and maybe that's true, but there's also people who just scale to the point where it's just absurd and the programs aren't really doing much at all
Hmm.
at some
Yeah,
level, or
yeah.
you have to like get 15 kids to one camp counselor or
Right,
something,
right, right.
and it's just
Yeah,
like, what is
yeah,
the point of this anymore?
yeah.
I mean, and it's still, like you said, I mean, I still think some of those programs have value if it's just getting kids outside, even if they're not particularly having a deep experience with a camp counselor or a particular place or something along those lines. Like, it's still probably better than nothing.
Hmm.
But to actually teach and to create the kind of connections that we're looking for, I think you have to stay small to
Yeah,
that level, or just diversify in a different ways. Like if you had a big enough property, you could have the like somebody else do an offshoot where they're have a nursery or something,
yeah, yeah,
like a
yeah,
plant
yeah.
nursery. Like there's a eco village. I don't know if they call themselves that. I think they do. Called Lost Valley um, Education Center in Dexter, Oregon, where we're hosting Echoes in Time now.
Okay.
It was our first year there this last year. It was a great, great event, but also it's like interesting to see the community and see how they run things there. And it's essentially like a big property that's like 80 acres, and there's like maybe 30 people who live there, maybe 50 throughout the year,
Mm-hmm.
students and different people kind of coming in and out. And they have multiple businesses on site.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of it's education, some of it, and I just feel like that's probably a more sustainable model to have it diversified in that way to be able to predict what's happening,
Hmm.
longer term or something. But at the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
time,
yeah.
like, trying to coordinate something like that is also deeply challenging. And
Mm-hmm.
not, I've realized in the last few years, it's not what I'm going to do.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
I might go live at one of those places and
yeah.
have my
Right.
small little boutique, but I'm not going to be the one to organize the whole thing
Yeah,
anymore. Um,
yeah.
and yeah, it's that thing of, you were saying, do we do this thing? Do we just let it go when the time is ready for maybe it just goes away? And that's definitely something that we've talked about a lot with Rewild Portland and the coppicing of it and the restructuring and the different things that we're doing. I mean, our plan going forward is a succession plan, and so we've got, um, steps to that end where we're working on those steps. And at the same time, if like in a year and a half we haven't accomplished all those things,
Hmm.
and we're kind of like, okay, well, maybe we just, maybe Rewild Portland is just a name for an entity that runs Echoes in Time or
Yeah,
something. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, and that's okay. It doesn't
yeah.
have to be, the end all be all of anything really. Um, And it's sad, but also like I've been reading a lot lately about fission fusion dynamics within immediate return hunter-gatherer societies, and
Yeah.
it's funny because it kind of coalesces with some of the like perceptions that I had of or epiphanies I had about community maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where people you see these communes or these eco villages or nonprofits, whatever, like people build them. Maybe there's a charismatic person, maybe it's a group of people that work together for a certain amount of time, and eventually there's a falling out or something happens or somebody, they don't have the money to pay for it or whatever, and things kind of collapse or just become disorganized and the resources are then dispersed like a carcass
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
in
yeah.
the forest getting redistributed, right?
Mhm.
There's some form of redistribution of whatever accumulation happened at that. Um, it's actually like, that's very much more akin to the way that immediate return societies were structured socially.
Yeah.
There was no membership to a
Mm,
society, there was no ownership of things. So people, for the majority of human history, coalesced for a time and then dispersed for a time and coalesced for a time and dispersed. And you'd have like, maybe you hung out with a couple people and you went on some hunting parties or gathering parties for a while. You came back to a central location, distributed the food. Then you went with some other people for a while and then came back. Like the idea that we have to kind of create these things, these communities that last forever is definitely like a recent um, idea. And
yeah.
so for me, in terms of like thinking about rewilding and letting go, like the concept of like letting go to this thing that I've developed that I thought maybe had to live into perpetuity or something, has been pretty good on my conscience or pretty
Yeah.
good on my
Yeah.
like level of like just my anxiety, not having to worry, well, okay, maybe this does go away.
Yeah.
And what's the big deal?
Yeah.
It's not that big of a deal. Things will get redistributed. Rewild Portland was never going to save the planet.
Yeah.
Everybody who's been part of the organization shares similar values, and those values will get carried on and put into another project somewhere
Hmm.
else,
Yeah.
you know.
I think there's something, yeah, we always want to hold on to some sort of permanence, it seems like. And I really like this idea of things having a little more flow to it. I mean, like with material possessions, that's one of the things I love about primitive skills is like you spend all this time making something, a gourd canteen, and you've put all this time and you love it and you use it and it's so cool and then you hit it on a rock and it cracks. And it's like, some people are like, oh, I'll put it on my shelf. I'm like, no, I'm gonna throw that in the fire. Like this is
Yeah.
amazing. Like just let it
Yeah.
flow. Make the next
Yeah.
thing. Willow
Hmm.
baskets. Like we carry pack
Hmm.
baskets around all the time, and we've done it long enough that like we've had to just like say goodbye a few times, and I think that's a beautiful thing. My wife is so good about that with the farming. When things I had this dream of having pack goats. I love goats, and they're such a good subsistence animal. I'm like, oh, if we have goats, then we can like go in the wilderness more and they'll carry stuff. Our kids were
Hmm.
really small at the time. Like we can milk them. So we're like bringing food. They're carrying our stuff. We're going to spend so much more time in the wilderness. This is going to be amazing. Turns out having goats meant we just like spent all of our time taking care of the goats and we couldn't even think about leaving. It was like, and we had this great herd. They were amazing. And then one morning we wake up. We have like a 1 year old and a 4 year old. And she looks over at me and she's like, I think we should just sell all the goats. And I had this initial sense of like this huge existential identity crisis, my
Hmm.
dreams of like what we were going to do with these goats. I was like, we can't, what? And then I took a deep breath and I sort of took a step back and I thought, that's a great idea. And so we did. We rehomed all the goats. We killed a couple of them and ate them. And then we got a cow. And the beautiful thing about a cow is, in the farming world, so we move our animals every day in the green season to a new
Hmm.
pasture to get this is sort of like the hip, regenerative agriculture
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And we've really seen an incredible impact on the land. With goats, we would have to weed whack the area where we were going to move them to for the fence. And then we'd run like 5 lines of electric fencing around them and we'd put them in there. And then they'd only get out like 3 days a week. And the cows, we just run a single line and they walk in there and they stay there all day. And it's like, it would take us like an hour and a half to 2 hours daily to move our goats, and we can move the cows in like 10 minutes.
Hmm.
And then there's butter, and it's like, so,
Yeah.
like, and so
Yeah.
it was one of these things of opening up the space and like letting go of one dream created space for something else. And I think
Hmm.
that, we've done that as an organization where there's certain programs that we thought were going to be really cool. We ran them for a while and we're like this. So like we don't run after school programs anymore. And I feel a little bit like that's a bummer. Kids that are in school can't come out here. But it just it wasn't like at the heart of what was important.
Hmm.
And the reality is like we're not a program for everybody.
Yeah.
Um, and I love the idea of finding a way, mostly because I love the idea of finding a way to create opportunities for our students to, it's like I don't feel like I need Laughing Coyote to continue for me.
Hmm.
Like I'm gonna be gone eventually. Like I don't, like
Yeah.
but but for those that grow up wanting to live close to the land, like I would like to create space for that. And so,
Totally.
yeah, in 30 years, what's that going to look like? I don't know. I say a lot that we have kind of a vision of where we're going, but it's still pretty blurry. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
we're running down that path as fast as we can and figuring things out, but it's like it's the same. We've been chasing that same picture for almost 20 years,
Hmm.
and it's a little clearer now, but like I don't know what it is yet.
Hmm.
And probably as soon as I see that picture clearly, I'll croak. That'll be it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
Well, so I'm gonna give a little context to this one. I would say the first skill that like inspired me was bow drill. I was like, if I learn bow drill, it will open up the door to everything. And it kind of did.
Hmm.
That wasn't wrong.
Hmm.
It was just like there's a few things in life where there's like a before and an after, and I'm like friction fire is like there's like
Hmm.
a before friction fire and an after, and like having kids was another one of those. Like
Hmm.
there's before I had kids and now I have kids. Like it was a life-defining moment the first time I blew a tinder bundle into flame. Um, but a handful of years later, I learned hand drill. And for those of us in this world, like hand drill's pretty cool. Like, and I got good at it. Like I did it a lot, and I got to the point where I was like, I'm never gonna do bow drill again. Like I kept teaching it because I'm like, oh, it's easier for people to learn. But like for me, it's like I'm all hand drill for the rest of my life. And then this summer when we were hanging out in that cave, you did the coolest thing that I've seen in a long time. Um, so y'all listening, Peter took a willow stick and he stripped a piece of bark off of it and he twisted it up and tied it back on the stick and used it as the bow for a bow drill. And what's so cool about this is the crux of the bow drill is the string. Um, and many of us, have tried with natural fibers occasionally, maybe with buckskin, but like we all just keep going back to paracord. And suddenly I was like, man, I need to get dialed with the natural fiber strings. And so I came back and like that's all I'm doing now. I'm just doing
Awesome.
bow drill with and I can't that bark thing was so cool, but it's the wrong time of year here. So I
Hmm.
just have a bow drill a dog bang cord and I'm tracking every coal I make with this cord and I'm just gonna see how far I can get.
Yeah.
And so far it has
Awesome.
no sign of wearing through. I'm like 20 coals
Yeah.
in on this
Yeah.
particular cord. Um, and I have some other little experiments in there that I'm playing with. But the whole point of this is like I took something that I thought I put to bed, and it just like I got re-inspired.
Mm.
I'm so stoked on this. So my question is, what's the edge for you right now? What's that thing that you're
Oh,
like,
that's a good question.
what's something that's inspiring you that you're
Yeah.
chasing towards learning?
That's a good question too. Yeah, and I just want to comment on the bow drill thing too. Uh, I saw that done somewhere, and where was it? Oh, it was Tom McElroy.
Okay,
So who I interviewed on the podcast a
cool.
couple months ago, and I told him about it because when I was like 18, I did a tracker school, And he came out and put this branch on the table and didn't say anything. And over the next 45 minutes, converted the entire branch into a bow drill, including the bark, and then
Nice.
got a coal with it.
Cool.
And I just was like, what the hell?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and so then after that, yeah, just experimenting with the natural cordage. And then when I got into, when I started doing street performance, I had a stinging nettle bow drill cord that I used for like 2 years.
Oh
And it's
man.
it's weird for me to say that because it blows my mind even now, like,
Yeah.
15, 20 years later, like thinking about it, like, how did that last 2 years,
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
did. So hearing your dog bane story, I'm like, okay, right. Yeah, the natural fiber is really strong. Is it 2 ply or 4 ply or
It's just two ply.
amazing?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Is it the
Yeah.
dog bane from Utah?
No, it's one I'd made like you know how you do it. Like I'm teaching cordage one day. I make like 8 feet of
Yeah,
cordage and then I threw it in my pack and it's been there for
yeah,
who knows how many years.
yeah.
But I'm like, sweet. So I tied it onto my bow and I'm doing the whole like, working on the angled bowing and I almost
Hmm.
can't do
Hmm.
it the other way now. And
Yeah,
I had to
yeah,
demo it the other day. I'm like, oh shoot, how do I do it with a
yeah,
paracord
yeah.
string?
Right.
Um,
That's funny.
so
Yeah, I
yeah,
think so. Yeah, to answer your question, with that in regards to bow drill, I think what's called the Egyptian bow drill
yeah,
method, I think is actually specifically designed for like plant fiber because of the way that it coils around. So you can use like the normal stroke of a bow drill without holding it at an angle if you're
yeah,
doing the Egyptian style, which it just means it's wrapped several times.
yeah.
But I haven't really experimented with that, and I haven't really seen anybody. Maybe I haven't really searched for it, but there are people who've taught it at the gatherings over the years. I think Jim Knapp maybe knows how to do it. So that's one of the things that's in my mind. The next time I'm at a gathering, I prefer to learn from other people.
Yeah, me too.
Um,
Me
and,
too.
and I could experiment it with on my own, but I'd really like to see somebody do it and kind of work with somebody. So
Mhm.
that's I'm hopefully going to some gatherings in the next year or two,
Cool.
and maybe there'll be somebody there. But the main thing that I've been really trying to get at is flint napping lately, in particular. Um, I can make a crummy arrowhead, right? Like
Yeah.
I have enough skill to sort of do it, but it's not going to look beautiful. It'll look like something you find in the archaeological record, which most artifacts that are flint knap don't really look that great. But I still couldn't make like a Folsom point or a Clovis point or something like that. Like
Yeah,
those are
yeah,
still too sophisticated. I could make a crude, I should just say crude, flake tool, knife edge, arrowhead.
yeah.
But the craziest thing, like I've learned this from people and like at Echoes in Time years ago, before I took it over, I sat down. It was like the year I took it over, maybe the year before that. It's probably the year before that. I sat down and I just was like, I'm just going to do flint knapping this week. So I
Yeah.
hung out with a couple of the flint knappers there. And the whole time I just took big, obsidian flakes and I made bifaces,
Hmm.
not refined, no pressure flaking, just percussion flaked bifaces. And my plan was, so I made like 20 that week or maybe
Yeah.
30 or something. And I put them in a bag and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna connect with one of these nappers outside of Echoes and I'll refine these into arrowheads. The other day I was like going, maybe last year, I'm going through boxes of my stuff and I come across this like bag full of these pie
Yeah.
faces.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh man, I kind of forgot about these. I should just like focus on flint having again. These are probably it was probably like 4 or 5 years ago that I
Mhm.
that I made these and I started thinking about it. I was like, no, that was like 11 years ago. You know,
Yeah.
like time just flies, and that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like I said, I start getting into this stuff and then I'm like a cultural person. I want to understand how the culture works, how things get brought together.
Yeah.
And that's been the skill that I've focused on for a long time is the community building. I call myself a
Mhm.
lifelong community organizer,
Yeah.
but I'm tired of that.
Right, right, right.
It's fucking exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, last year I went to Ireland and there was a flint knapper there at the Crinne Lunasa first ancestral skills gathering on the island led by Wild Awake. And one of the teachers there brought some of the flint from the northern part of the island.
Cool.
And so I was kind of like, ooh, next year I'm going to come back and I'm going to go harvest flint from that part of the
Nice.
island. Flint is, we have obsidian everywhere here. Obsidian is like glass, it just shatters. You can't really do a ton of things with it aside from cut meat,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? And so blade cores and tiny little arrowheads are like the main things that are
Yeah.
useful with obsidian. You can't really make knives. I mean, if you see an obsidian knife, it's not something that somebody would actually use. It's just jewelry or like a
Yeah.
ceremonial ritual type thing, you know. I
Mhm.
like to make stuff I can use.
Yeah.
And I want stone knives and big points and
Yeah.
blades and stuff. So um, this year I went back and we did circle through. I went to the gathering and we tried to harvest stuff on site there, and it's just
Mhm.
the location where they have the gathering doesn't have the best material. There's like some crumbly agates and some
Mhm.
crumbly basalts, and we made some flake tools that would
Yeah.
work to process an animal, but
Yeah.
nothing that was going to be like, ooh, this is it.
Yeah.
Um, and so then after the gathering, I went back to Dublin, rented a car, went up to the north. There's this place called White Rocks on the coast, and it's just got flint just like pouring out
Oh,
of the cliffs, you
oh
know.
my gosh. Amazing.
Um, I had this crazy experience there that I won't get into, but I'll just say in brief, I've had a dream about this place when I was like in my late teens, and then I was walking down the beach there, and I was like, this is where my dream was.
Oh.
And so that was cool. That kind of impacted that experience too. But and then this is where the flint was in the dream. It was anyway. I'm not going to get into the dream, but so I was able to gather some flint there. And a couple of years ago, God, again, a couple of years ago, probably like 8 or 9 years ago, I went to the Tucson Gem and Rock Show and got a bunch of German flint.
Mm.
So I've had that, and I've been too afraid to touch it because I'm
Yeah.
not great enough. I don't want to ruin it,
Yeah.
And sorry, this is a long story, but so
Right.
then I go to Southern England after Ireland, and
Mm.
we go to the Jurassic Coast, and I gather a bunch of the English flint,
Yeah.
and we go up to the north of the southern, northwest corner, just kind of into Cornwall at
Mhm.
Tintagel, town
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Tintagel,
Yeah.
and there's Tintagel Castle. Underneath is
Yeah.
Merlin's Cave.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I go inside Merlin's cave, and right in the entrance, I find a nodule of flint about this big. There's no other flint around. I found a
Whoa.
couple of other pieces that were really
Yeah.
beautiful, but
Yeah.
I found this nodule of flint, and I was like, okay, well, I'm taking this,
Yeah.
So now I've got like some Irish flint, English flint, and German flint,
Hmm.
and I watched that guy. What's his name? What's his name? It's Ryan Gill. I've got his books
Oh
behind me.
yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Ryan Gill, great YouTube channel, Primitive Hunter.
Hmm.
Um, I watched his like hour-long flint-knapping video because I was like, I just want a refresher. Like I
Yeah.
know it all. I can teach the principles, but like I just want to watch somebody explain it and just
Hmm.
watch an hour of it. And I know that this guy is legit.
Yeah.
There's so much garbage on YouTube.
Yeah.
I looked specifically, found his channel. He has like a 2 hour video that's like, this is going to be a boring video. I'm just going to be flint-knapping and talking about it. And I was like, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And as I was watching, I was like, I've been flint-knapping wrong for like fucking 20 years. And nobody corrected what I was doing wrong. And I can't even explain to you really what it is aside from just like the platforms. I didn't understand that the platform is the edge itself.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
to me, the platform is like right above the edge. Like
Right.
I'm making, but like everything he's doing, he's just straight up hitting the edge itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And every time I've been hitting the platform, I was imagining it was just above the actual corner part.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so dumb. And so I watched that and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
all right. And I go outside and I start playing with that Irish flint and I just immediately made like a nice drill bit, that's not like perfect, but
Yeah.
it's decent. The Irish flint is pretty hard to work, but I got up the nerve and I was like, I'm gonna mess with this German flint that I got.
Nice.
And
Nice.
I started making it and I've got it to the point now where it's bifacial and I'm
Cool.
gonna stop there for a minute, watch some more of his stuff again,
Yeah.
and then go back. I'm actually going to a friend's this weekend up in Olympia who's the first person who taught me flint knapping. I'm gonna bring
Cool.
some of that stuff and have him give me
Nice.
some tips and things. But so
Yeah.
that's where my edge is
Yeah.
back on the rocks. I love the rocks. I love flint knapping. My name, Peter Bauer, it means rock and then builder. So I feel
Oh,
like there's something
yeah.
in there I could,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, uh, market that or something if I,
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
you
Right.
know.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, that and the Egyptian bow drill. Those are the two kind of things I've been thinking a lot about and
That's
working
cool.
towards. Yeah.
That's cool. I love with the stone tools. It's so funny because I think flint knapping is the hardest skill of like the hard skills in the primitive skills repertoire.
Mm.
There's a whole bunch of reasons I think that, but it's also funny because it's also the first one.
Totally.
And it's
Yeah.
so funny as like modern humans, like I'm on that same pathway where it's like, yeah, last week I spent the whole week doing stone tools, made a bow drill kit with only stone tools, made a
Yep.
pump drill with only stone tools.
Amazing.
And it's like, here I am, yeah, 20 years into this journey, and I'm like, I've had to go backwards.
Hmm.
It's like I'm a reverse time traveler and I'm
Yeah.
finally getting to the starting point, and I think that um it's pretty cool. It like changes the whole
Hmm.
perception of the whole thing when you start doing it with the stones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that reminds me too, something I wanted to say about the bow drill. Like, the cord is this crux of the bow drill, and it's one of the limiting factors of why, the hand drill is more simplistic, it's easier to carry. It's actually what was used in North America
Yeah.
across the continent
Yeah.
pre-contact.
Yeah.
Um, but getting into basket weaving is what made me get better at bow drill.
Hmm.
And it's interesting to think about I was kind of like, well, I'm gonna like diverge from all these other skills and focus on just this one that
Hmm.
isn't related at all. But then you realize like how much all of the skills are interrelated
Yeah.
in various ways. Because basket
Absolutely.
weaving is teaching you bark, you can weave with bark, you can weave with sticks, you can turn sticks into like flexible material,
Hmm.
you can turn round things flat, you can turn flat things round. Like you
Uh,
just learn how to manipulate wood and fiber in this particular way that then increases your abilities in all of these other avenues, and yeah, so in that sense, it felt like I was pigeonholing myself in basket weaving, only to realize that all of a sudden I got really good at bow drill and also shelter construction.
right.
And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
there's so many other things, so many other
Yeah.
avenues that go plant identification,
Hmm.
just various things. So it's cool to kind of see how they all integrate. But I agree with you. You were like, um, bow drill is sort of this primary experiential skill that I think sets off everything. And also the stone tools. If you can do a bow drill with stone tools, that's like a pretty decent level of fluency. And you
Hmm.
don't have to be able to flint knap a decent arrowhead to do that. You just have to know, percussion flaking, which is
Yeah.
kind of the
Yeah.
first step anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I mean, I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to have this conversation. The fact that we happened to be in the same place in Utah this summer after, you know, yeah, I didn't realize you followed me. I've known who you have been, who you are for a long time, and also to meet and also like get along and enjoy those
Yeah.
conversations. Like that's also
Yeah.
not always the case. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, grateful for that experience in person and then for this relationship to be able to continue even though we're in this weird place in the modern world where we're across,
Mhm.
thousands of miles apart and we can
Yeah.
still have a good conversation. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
thanks for having me on
Awesome.
and conversations like this always get my wheels turning. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to see where that goes too.
Yeah. What's the website for Laughing Coyote? Is it just Laughing Coyote Project?
laughingcoyoteproject.org. That's what we are on. I mean, that's everywhere. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, but we don't really use it. Laughing Coyote Project. You can find us all over the place.
Awesome. Thanks,
Yeah.
Neil.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Peter.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Rewilding Podcast. Check out the show notes to connect with my guest and for a list of resources that we mentioned in our conversation. If this episode inspired you, made you think more deeply, or gave you some new tools to use, make sure to subscribe and become a patron at patreon.com/Peter Michael Bauer. If you're new to rewilding or want to expand your perception of it, I recommend attending one of my Rewilding 101 workshops, which I offer both in person in Portland, Oregon, and online for those who live around the world via Zoom. You can check upcoming dates and register at rewildportland.com. Thanks for listening.